Legal forms, lots of, we all sweat over legal forms, right? Well, what about training a legal form classifier on LEI reference data? Well, to explain all that is Zornitsa Manolova, head of data quality management and data science, Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation, Switzerland, and Dominik, Jany, senior data scientist, Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation, Switzerland. Also, cześć. Welcome.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you also very much for the invitation to present our work today. In this session, we will talk about legal entities, legal entity names, legal forms, and why it is important to distinguish between the different types of legal forms. We will also explore the role of standardization, and of course, we will talk about AI as a part of the solution. So a little bit of a background, where we are coming from, what is the LEI, and what is the data we are dealing with, and the environment we are operating, because we believe this is important to understand the framework we are acting. So GLEIF stands for Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation. It is a Swiss non-for-profit foundation founded by the Financial Stability Board in the aftermath of the global financial crisis in 2008. Our mission is to manage a global network of partners, the LEI issuing organizations, and together with the Regulatory Oversight Committee, which brings together public authorities from across the globe, such as, for example, the European Commission, or the European Central Bank, or other central banks across the globe. Together with the ROC and the LEI issuing organizations, we shape the so-called global LEI system. It is a unique example of a public-private partnership. Today, there are 38 LEI issuing organizations and more than 3 million LEIs. But what exactly is an LEI? LEI stands for Legal Entity Identifier. It is a 20-digit alphanumeric code. It is to be seen just below the level 1 title. It is based on ISO 17442 standard designed to uniquely identify entities across the globe. So each entity has one unique LEI, and this serves as a permanent identifier. The LEI connects also to reference data. As you can see on the left side of the screen, this is the part we code level 1 data and answers the question, who is who? It provides information about legal names or other names, where the entity is registered, the local identifier, the jurisdiction of the formation, the legal form, the status of the entity. We also provide additional identifiers to which the LEI is mapped. In this case, we have here Open Corporates ID, QCC code, or SMP identifier, but there are also entities that provide information about their MIC or ISIN codes. On the right side of the screen, you see the information about direct and ultimate parent, answering the question, who owns whom? And perhaps the best part of all of it, it is not just highly standardized data and of high quality. As I'm allowed to say this as I'm dealing on a daily basis, but it is also considered a public good. It is publicly available, free of charge. You can access the data via the API, via the LEI search, or a full file copy. Free of charge, you don't even need to register an account for this. Okay, so we are coming closer to the actual topic. We want to talk about entity legal forms and why they are important. Legal forms provide information about the company's liability and can be associated with different legal or tax obligations. In many countries, we have the requirement that the legal form needs to appear next to the name of the entity, for example, just to provide additional information to potential investors, among other things. So there are many aspects that make legal forms interesting and important, but the one we find most relevant is the role in the identification of legal entities. In many matching exercises, when you have two sets of data of legal entities and you would like to compare them and merge them, you need to identify uniquely whether the entity on the left side is the same on the right side. And sometimes you have just the name, and the name could be identical or similar, and we found out that the legal form is a very good indicator to distinguish between different entities. So on the screen, there are a couple of examples. We have always the same name, different legal forms. Sometimes we have the address of the entity, but this changes rather more frequently than the legal form. And for example, in some jurisdictions, you can have the same legal name, but different legal forms registered in the registry, and these are completely two separate entities. Or we can have also the case in Europe, we can have Future Capital BV as a Dutch entity, but we can also have a Future Capital BV as a Belgium entity, and these are also completely different entities because there are different legal liabilities associated in the different jurisdictions where the organization is registered. So, as you can see, legal forms could be important for the identification of the legal entities, but they bring also certain complexity with them. And it is also important to recognize that it may require some local knowledge and domain knowledge to distinguish between the legal forms. So, on this example here, on the screen, it says the text is in Finnish. Apologies, I don't speak Finnish, but maybe later we can exchange a little bit on this. So, are these two strings legal names? Are they using the same legal form? For me, again, please apologize my ignorance, but the second one looks like maybe an address with a number next to it. It could be a street number, right? But the good thing is that somebody, my colleague Dominik, did the research prior to this session, and he figured out that both both strings contain the same legal form. The second one is just abbreviation of the first, and So how we can identify this in a more straightforward way? There is a standard for legal forms. It is the ISO 20275, and as mentioned before, the LEI reference data is highly standardized, and we use this standard to associate the legal form to the legal entity. And by the way, not only we use this standard, it already became also part of the EU vocabularies. And how this looks like, okay. So on the screen now, you see an excerpt from the standard or from the entity legal form codes, ELF codes abbreviation. Currently, it includes more than 3,200 legal forms in more than 190 jurisdictions, and every single LEI record, for example, carries an ELF code, so all 3 million LEIs record. To summarize, legal forms are important and helpful for legal entities identification, but could become a little bit complex to handle. There are standards that could be adopted to simplify the task, but this requires also additional effort, time, and resources. And with that, I will hand over to my colleague Dominik, who will share with you how we solve the problem.
Okay, thank you, Zornitsa. Let's talk about the technical aspects of this work. So when we started working on this project, we first wanted to know what does the state of the art look like? What do other people do to classify legal forms? And we noticed two things. First thing is oftentimes people are still using string matching, so very simple methodologies, or what we call classical machine learning. So things like decision trees or support vector machines. And the second thing we noticed is oftentimes these projects, they focus only on a small number of jurisdictions or even on one jurisdiction. However, in our task, we wanted to cover the entire world. So what we did is, here you go. We basically focused on the 30 largest jurisdictions in the LEI repository. And for each jurisdiction, we simply tried out different methodologies. And here in this table, you can basically see that we tried out traditional approaches and transformer approaches. And ultimately, what we noticed is that in most cases, the transformer models outperform other methodologies. And on this topic, we also published a research paper with our partners, Soziovestics Labs, the University of St. Gallen, and the University of Dublin, that you can freely access and have a closer look after a presentation, if you like. Now, maybe you're wondering, why do you need transformers for this? Because usually these large language models, they work very well on sentences, on PDF documents. However, legal names were usually very short. And for this, we prepared one example. So here on the right-hand side, you can see that there's an entity called Volksbank Odenwald, and the last two characters tell you the legal form. And this is a very simple case. Here you can even use string matching if you have some German domain knowledge, or you can use traditional machine learning. And at the bottom, you can see the word attributions generated by a transformer model, and you can see also the transformer obviously correctly identifies the legal form based on the last two characters. Now, on the left-hand side, things get more complicated. Here we are looking at a foundation that belongs to this bank. And in this case, traditional approaches and string matching are going to fail because they will still focus most likely on the last two characters. Whereas transformers, they are sequence models. That means they understand the context in a sentence or a context in a legal name. And they will tell you, look, this is a foundation, and it correctly identifies the legal form. So ultimately, what we noticed is, well, if you use traditional machine learning, you still need some minimum domain knowledge. At least you need to be able to understand the language. And for instance, for us, it was very difficult to train a Japanese model using the traditional approach. However, when we started using the BERT-based models, it became quite easy to do this because these models are already pre-trained on specific languages or sometimes also on multiple languages. And all we needed to do is fine-tune them. So we basically added a classification layer. We trained the models for a couple of epochs, and we used the already existing ELF codes in the LEI repository to basically make the models understand what they're supposed to do with these ELF codes. And at the table below, you can basically see how the transformer models in most jurisdictions actually outperformed the classical approach. And I think the most interesting example for us was Japan, where basically our traditional approach didn't work at all, while the BERT model more or less worked out of a box, so to say. So what is the outcome of all of this? In the end, we created a command line tool that allows anyone to basically provide any given entity name, and the tool will tell you what kind of legal form is it. And it just doesn't give you the legal form, it also assigns the ELF code standard. And today and yesterday, I learned that basically all the people attending this conference were very big fans of standards and harmonization. And this is basically what you can do with this. It's a small building block for someone who has a bunch of entity information and wants to assign a global standard for legal forms. And the second thing we did with our results is we improved the LEI data quality. So basically the entire presentation so far focused on the upper right, on training and testing the classifier. And after all of this was done, what we did is, well, we applied this classifier to the entire LEI repository. And we looked for cases where our models would actually say, hey, the existing LEI data is showing a legal form where the model disagrees. And this approach actually only works because the vast majority of the LEI data was correct. So what we did is, out of the 1.1 million records where the data was trained on, we found about 7,000 cases where the model would say, hey, maybe this is incorrect. And we used GLIFE's challenge facility to update these records. How does that work? So in the LEI system, we have a challenge facility where a local expert will review a raised data challenge. So in other words, we used an expert review to verify if what our models did is actually plausible. And the overall acceptance rate of this task was 83%, which means ultimately our models were able to improve the data quality in the system. And now the funny thing is, basically you can now retrain the models because your underlying data has been improved. And this is actually what we are now doing every few months, improving the models, raising challenges, and basically also making all of this available. So all of these models that we trained are available in Hugging Face, and people can just use them for their own tasks. And very recently, additionally, we also introduced this model into a so-called pre-check facility. That means every time a new LEI record enters the repository, it runs against 200 data quality checks, and this model is now one of these checks. So basically, it's now actually, so to say, in production and used on a daily basis. And with that, yeah, we would like to thank you for your attention. And here you can see all the resources.
Thank you very much. A couple of Slido questions. Are there countries that have a poor coverage in LEI search? Which are they? Do you want to name names here, or name and shame?
Certainly, there are countries with a higher coverage. If I would like to answer the question in a positive way, yeah, I don't know the countries' poor coverage.
Maybe could stand to improve or something like that. By the way, hello to all those of you who are connected in cyberspace, and you can see the QR code to join us on Slido and to send your questions as well. One other question, similarly with LEI records search, is there a website for entity legal forms?
Yes, so basically on glyph.org, there is a subsection focusing on the ELF code list. And since it's also an ISO standard, you will also find it on the ISO website.
Okay, are there any, sorry.
And it happens that GLIFE is the maintenance agency for this standard, so the entire list of ELF codes could be found on our webpage.
Good. I think that does it. Any questions out there in the audience for Dominik and Zornitsa? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.